This doesn't seem very environmentally friendly. Century-old Joshua trees in the California desert will be cleared to make way for a 2,300-acre solar project.
Oh, no.
This is in Kern County, California. Besides the destruction of the old trees,
They're Joshua.
the Joshua trees,
Yeah.
great U2 album.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
But they're very unique, and I can't believe they would even take one down, let alone.
you know how they got their name?
No, how did they get their name?
Joshua from the Bible.
Oh,
And the Mormons, when they were making their way west, thought the trees had this idea reaching out and pointing the way west. So they named them after. Oh. Useless factoid.
No, I like that. Thank
Anyway.
you.
I thought, wait. Besides the destruction of the Joshua trees, the residents living near the project say county and state officials who approved the project have ignored their other concerns about construction dust and impacts to endangered desert tortoises. I remember when a spotted owl could stop the logging industry in the Pacific Northwest. Now, desert tortoises are getting no consideration, not to mention the trees. I think this speaks to what our next guest is talking about when he argues that environmentalism in America is dead. The problem is, just in terms of other ironies about what the movement is today and what the impact of said movement is, talking about what's called the environmentalist movement, but I think Robert Bryce makes a good point that it requires a change in terminology to reflect what it actually is today. Peter Huntsman, the chairman of Huntsman Corp., writing in the Wall Street Journal, the climate catastrophism that big tech helped birth, advocating for net zero energy transition. Well, now that approach has and is creating a big problem for big tech. According to Goldman Sachs, artificial intelligence, the latest innovation, likely to drive a 160% increase in data center power demand by 2030. That's, 5.5 years from now. And wind and solar power ain't going to cut it. So you're wanting to, get to net zero by 2030 and ban the combustion engine vehicles in California. Well, now you better put your AI dreams on hold then, big tech, if that's the play you're going to make. Not to mention, you better get ready to put desert tortoises on the endangered species list, you mean people.
I'm really shocked that's going to happen, but I guess it's already a done deal.
It's what happens when you've got ideological blinders on. Robert Bryce is an acclaimed author and energy expert, the producer of the 5-part series Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid, which is quite good. Environmentalism in America is dead, argues Mr. Bryce. Robert Bryce, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning to you.
So that story out of California, the Joshua trees and the desert tortoises subordinated to the solar farm, that's sort of what you're talking about when you're talking about what quote-unquote environmentalism actually is today.
Exactly, Dan. And, I'm old enough to remember when these NGOs, I don't call them environmental groups anymore, they're climate activist groups, when they cared about whales, when they cared about wildlife, when they cared about open space and conserving, view sheds. And now, as I say in my piece, it's on my Substack, robertbryce.substack.com, environmentalism has been replaced by climatism and renewable energy fetishism. And I think that's exactly it. It's this idea that, any wind project, any solar project anywhere is good because, climate change. Well, no, damn it, no. We need to be protecting open space. We need to be protecting whales, tortoises, golden eagles, all these things that have been traditional parts of conservationist movement in America. But that's all been discarded, and largely because so many of these NGOs have become businesses. That's what they are now. They're climate businesses, not conservation groups.
But they've also been radicalized. I mean, think of how many people are gluing themselves to runways because of jet engine fuel, or gluing themselves to the hardwood at an NBA playoff game, or unique paintings. But how did they become so radicalized? What happened?
Boy, Amy, how long do we have this morning?
We have a 4-hour show, sir.
We have a 12-hour show today. Well, I mean, I think that one of the short answers is that this environmentalism, climatism, has replaced traditional religion for a lot of people, right? That instead of going to church and worshiping, Christ or God or Abraham or Jehovah or whoever, instead it's the earth has become the thing that we have to save, and we've sinned against the earth. Therefore, we have to get right with the earth. So and many of these beliefs overlap on traditional Christian beliefs. But I want to make one other quick point, because you started with the point in Kern County. This is the part that, just as my late brother John Bryce would have said, just chaps my hide, just grills my cheese. This big solar project in Kern County. Kern County is the poverty rate in Kern County is 17%, almost 18%. The national average in the United States is 11%. They're putting this massive solar project in one of the poorest counties in California, a state that has the highest poverty rate in America. And who's the money behind it? KKR, a private equity firm, was managing $500 billion in assets. So when I look at so much of this climatism and renewable energy fetishism, really it's about class. And who's getting screwed? It's the poor and the middle class. And this case in California is just among the clearest examples of that.
Well, so let's follow the money, because that's what you suggest we do. And I wonder sort of who is gaming who. The old guard environmental groups that people would know, the Greenpeaces and the World Wildlife Funds and so forth. Are they still funded by the same institutional funders of these movements and doing the same things they were doing? Or have they been essentially repositioned through corporate financing as well? In other words, is it the KKRs and the other rent seekers that essentially and the foundations that essentially hijacked the environmental movement and turned it into this renewable climatism movement that you were talking about?
Yeah, I like the way you put that, because whether it's been hijacked or whether it's some kind of marriage of convenience. And
right.
One of the points that I make in this piece is that now I call them the anti-industry industry, right? All of these NGOs, these climate groups, they're anti-nuclear and anti-hydrocarbons, but their annual gross receipts, according to GuideStar, the top 25, they're taking in something like $4.7 billion a year. It's just what's the first rule of a bureaucracy? You maintain the bureaucracy. So these groups have become businesses on their own, and what's their first priority? Well, make sure they raise money to keep themselves employed. So Sierra Club, Rocky Mountain Institute. One of the best examples of this is, in fact, the Rocky Mountain Institute, which founded by Amory Lovins, in Colorado. It's all this soft path thing since for 50 years, right? But where do they get their money? J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Shell, and what are those companies doing? Big banks. They make money by doing tax equity financing for these alternative energy projects. So, as my friend Chuck Spinney called it, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. These big businesses, big banks, big NGOs get all this money to encourage the building of alternative energy, and then they get money for doing these reports that say, we need more wind and solar and batteries. Well, of course. And they'll have also Amazon, right? So it's all of a piece, right? But it's in my view, I don't think this is a cynical view, Dan. It's about cash. It has nothing to do with climate change.
Well, and then when you have the federal government to do what the Biden administration did with the backdoor Green New Deal, and to be fair, 20 Republican senators signing on to support it as well, because they're going to build some roads and bridges. I mean, you're flooding the zone with all this cash that can be leveraged with additional cash at the state and local level, and now you've got the state as your backstop if you're engaged in speculative investments in the energy sector, like you're describing.
Well, and it's an absolute flood of cash. So, KKR, right? They're a private equity firm. What do they care about solar? Nothing. What do they care about? The investment tax credit. So with that solar project, they can get 30% or more of the initial cost of the project from the government. So of course, why wouldn't they do it? But let's talk for a minute, if you don't mind. I'll just shift it. Let's talk about whales.
Okay.
This is the ultimate in the environmental betrayal.
Right. Maybe second only to the turtle with the straw in his nose. But anyway, go ahead.
There you go. But, I'm old enough to remember it was kind of a joke back in the 70s, save a gay baby whale for Jesus, right? Well, that's gone now. right? Instead, these NGOs, one of them American Progress, I quoted it in my piece on Substack, at the Sierra Club, saying, oh, well, we need these, offshore wind turbines because, climate change. And, oh, it's the oil and gas industry that's funding these groups that are fighting it. No, wrong. It's local communities all along the East Coast, Eastern Seaboard saying, we don't want these projects here. Are you kidding? And as far as the North Atlantic right whale, imagine if the oil and gas industry was planning to put not just hundreds, but potentially thousands of offshore platforms in the middle of known habitat for the North Atlantic right whale. These NGOs would be going crazy. But because it's wind turbines, crickets, nothing. They say nothing because, environmentalism, it's climatism and renewable energy fetishism. And the wind turbine is one of these very prime examples, like the solar panel, this image that's the fetishistic image of this object that they think is just so wonderful.
Well, it's really interesting, and and it's also noteworthy that there's no sort of opposition. You would think there would be some old guard holdouts that understand what's happening, just as you're describing it, and the money there substantiates the claims that you're making. And they would say, "What? I'm not going along with this. No, I am in the business of trying to protect open space and trying to save endangered species and trying to maintain the integrity of waterways and so on and so forth." But you just don't hear. I mean, where is the Sierra Club or Greenpeace or some of these old guard organizations? They've all just been bought off.
Bought, paid for, in the checkout line, in the sack. I mean, it's just that I don't see any other way to describe it. And it's, I'm a lifelong bird watcher. And the idea that we should be putting these wind turbines up all over the place, not just killing birds, killing bats, killing insects. But it to me, it's just. But the whale issue is the best example of this environmental betrayal.
Yeah.
But if I could go back just one very quickly to Rocky Mountain Institute, I mentioned them. Their budget went up 12-fold between 2012 and 2022. They went from $10 million a year to $117 million. And it's all because these big corporations are now suddenly giving them a flood of money to promote this alternative energy hoo-ha, because there's money to be made. And now I track these renewable projects in the Renewable Rejection Database, which is on my website, robertbryce.com. I'm getting contacted by local communities all over the country every week saying, hey, we have another solar project, wind project being proposed. Can you help us? Because the amount of money that is behind the KKRs, the Apex Clean Energy, which is owned by a big private equity firm, it's just staggering. And they have to run over rural America in order to cite these projects so the big banks, big business, big law firms can make more money.
Well, and the thing that's so unnerving about it is, you put us in this position to just looking at what is viable with respect to energy and the energy needs of a $25 trillion economy. And, it's not going to be switchgrass and windmills and solar panels. But it doesn't mean I'm a big fan of oil and gas CEOs who act as rent seekers, too. And as you say, Shell donating to some of these environmental groups to essentially use them as AstroTurf coverage. So it's, there's nobody wearing a white hat in this story, at least not in this sector, because they're all in bed with the state.
Well, and that's a fair point. And who's developing, I laugh when I see these reports of, these claims, oh, it's the oil industry that's, the ones fighting, trying to stop offshore wind. It's the oil industry that's putting up offshore wind. Are you kidding me? Shell is one of the developers. BP is one of the others. Norsk Hydro, which now what do they call themselves? Equinor. These are companies that are in the oil and gas business. What are you talking about? But this is part of the playbook that, and I will say disinformation, misinformation that is coming from these climate NGOs and their allies in the media, and they have a lot of them in the media, in the New York Times in particular, that they won't report on this backlash against this alternative energy. The New York Times, they will not report on the backlash against wind and solar in New York State. They just won't do it. And I know this I've been tracking it for more than 10 years, 15 years now. It's truly incredible. But it's environmental betrayal of the first order, and it's because there's so much money now behind this alternative energy craze.
He is Robert Bryce, acclaimed author and energy expert, producer of the 5-part series Juice: Power, Politics, and the Grid. Check it out And you can check out his writings at Robert Bryce, B-R-Y-C-E, robertbryce.substack.com. Robert Bryce, thanks so much. Great stuff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hi, it's Sean Thompson here. You know when you're at the mall and you go to those directory signs, the one that says you are here? Well, imagine that directory is a map of your preparation for retirement. Would you know where you are? My friend Tom Fortino at Alpha Wealth Group is offering you the opportunity to not only find yourself on that map, but also find the route toward a successful retirement. He calls it his retirement roadmap. You'll get an analysis of where you are right